Today's Talkback is in live performance from Farrell's and the Village Shop in downtown Augusta. In a show window locale facing Water Street, our program conversation is with an old friend and a Maine personality, well known for his work in newspaper publishing circles as an author and as a broadcaster. As pre-announced, John Gould, who now calls Friendship, Maine his permanent home, has come to town to help us launch the special program remote, which is an unusual occurrence for Talkback. The appearance of John Gould in Talkback, while it doesn't happen very often, is always an occurrence of personal satisfaction for me. John has been around for some time now, and he's become known throughout Maine and around the country for many contributions in book form on the Maine way of life. John, never do I come to the month of May without somewhat thinking of you because of one little activity you find yourself indulging in. That is the collection of so-called fiddleheads.
Yes, my column in the Monitor, every spring, just about this time, fiddleheads would make me a good topic, and I'd have another fiddlehead piece. And I think I'd done 29 in a row when we had a new editor, and the new editor said, we've done this before, let's stop. So my fiddlehead string was killed, I think it was 29 years.
Do you suppose that because of the unusual nature of this, that it probably had greater impact outside of the state than it did have right here?
Yes, there are not a lot of people in countrywide that won't believe you when you tell them about fiddleheads. They don't think that they've never heard of them. There's no such thing.
I noticed that a lot of people, and I think in your particular case now, you, because of freezing facilities, you carry them over the winter. Other people can them.
Yeah. Oh yes. Well, this fellow in New Brunswick, I think he's up around. Well, I don't know where he is. Edmonton, I guess it is. That cans them and freezes them, and they're in the markets the year round.
What about the situation down in Friendship? Are you find them down there right now?
I haven't seen any directly along the shore in Friendship, but the rivers that come into the ocean, most of them in that area are good fiddleheading in the upper reaches. You go up where the water's cool and there's still a little snow water coming off the hills, and when the water drops, you'll find the fiddleheads right along the bank of the stream.
John, when we get together, the matter of conversation can flow in many directions. Another matter that I thought about this morning, there are a lot of people who spoof somewhat at the whole matter of history, yet history has a way of repeating itself, and I think that probably right now is a very good example of what is happening at the national level, where you've got a great surge now that says, let's bring conscription of military training back to people, let's go back to gas rationing. And the latest thing, of course, is let's put another Kennedy in the White House.
Yes.
How do you look upon these things?
Of course, history does teach us many lessons, but we don't pay any attention. We don't learn from it. I suppose that history of the Roman Empire is all we need to look at and know what's going to happen to us. Well, let's not be philosophic. Let's talk about something else.
I think it's interesting from this standpoint. You've had an opportunity from the standpoint of a newspaper editor, publisher, and so forth to watch this passing scene. You're watching this passing scene. Oh, yeah. We're living in a kind of a time frame which seems to have gone beyond what a lot of us can understand. I'm sure a lot of older people find this difficult.
This is true, and it's there are tears and things, and it's sad to see a fellow stand up and make the same mistake twice, and of course society and nations do this. Yeah. We will. There's no need of crying about it.
Yeah. Right now, how are you occupying yourself? Are you in the matter of research for another book?
Well, you're always doing that, but right now, except for fiddleheads, I'm kind of trying to get a garden in. I've got peas up. I got my peas in this year on the 21st of April. And of course, traditionally, you're supposed to get them in on Patriots' Day, the 19th.
Uh-huh.
But it was too wet, and I missed it then they floated around for about a week, and then they sprouted. So I should have green peas by the 4th of July, which is on schedule.
You and my father-in-law, because I was taking a look at his garden last night, and they're up there. They're a good 6 inches. They seem to be cropping right along then. Huh?
Yeah.
I have a feeling that there is going to be a lot more interest in the matter of home gardenings this year than ever before. When we talk about today's the very strange things that are occurring in our day and age, the great price surge that has come with matter of food.
The seed people are having a picnic. I had a good response with a package of tomato seeds this year. The seeds, they come all tied up in a little ball of some sort for planting purposes. You've seen those. And I got this package, had 13 of them in it. And I planted them in the seed flat and put them in the windowsill and got 26 tomato plants out of it, which I think is pretty good. I assume there's more than one seed in one of those little balls.
It could very well be.
But imagine charging 85 cents for 26 seeds, you see. They're doing all right.
You know, when you can do a rundown of what the prices were at one time as opposed to what they are today, it's a very shocking kind of situation.
You're not old enough to remember when our congressman sent us seeds. You get free seeds from your congressman?
No,
I
don't
they gave
remember
that up way back, I'm going to say in the late 20s or early 30s. But you'd every year in the spring you get a little communication from your congressman, and he a little list, and you told him what you wanted for seeds. You had tomatoes and cucumbers and peas, and they'd come. They're free seeds by the Department of Agriculture.
Was it just a promotion?
No, the congressman gave away free seeds to the people.
Big-hearted.
Sure.
Okay.
And of course now you don't get anything from your congressman.
Yeah, well, which brings up a very good point of view. We've had a lot of things happening, not only at the national level, but at the state level. We'll get into all kinds of situations today. And coming back again to today in your situation, or your status as a retired editor, publisher, as you view these things, do you feel as though you want to suddenly take off again and say, gee, it's time for an editorial, but I've got no forum?
Well, no, I don't feel that way, but I quite often feel like calling somebody up and setting them right.
Oh, you mean they haven't done their homework?
One of the best lines in all of philosophy was written by a progenitor of yours of some sort. He was a French philosopher. I don't know who it was. Well, Rochefoucauld it might have been. He said that if he had been consulted at the creation, he might have spared the maker some absurdities. And I think sometimes if some of these newcomers would come around and confer with us older folks, maybe we could spare them some absurdities.
You think that the older generation is being overlooked in the matter of the sageness and advice that could be passed along then?
Oh, it always was. Yeah,
traditional.
Yes. Old men build nations and young men destroy them.
Yeah. And of course they're the old ones of tomorrow, aren't they?
Yes,
they look upon it too the same way.
They don't realize that until one day they begin getting their Social Security check.
Yeah, that's a telling factor. John, something else I know that you have been pretty much occupied with over a long period of time is this matter of wood splitting. The other day I had the first opportunity of watching one of these mechanical wood splitters at work. I'd never seen one working before.
They're great. Now I had 9 cords of wood this last season that my friend up in Franklin County brought down to me, and I cut it into fireplace lengths, and I started splitting it. And I had all but perhaps 1 cord of it done when my son showed up with a splitting machine. And we went through the rest of that pile in no time at all, and I'd been all winter doing the rest of it. But it's amazing to see, and the kids ran it. We just stood and watched the 2 youngsters do the thing. They pull a lever and it goes right through. It's great.
Yeah.
And pieces that I couldn't split at all. You know, when you wood like that, you come to one you can't split, you throw it aside, and you're doing that in the fireplace for Thanksgiving. Well, this machine went right through it, knots and all.
Yeah, it has, you know, it's a great side where you could say efficiency. You chalk up a big A on the thing. However, we lose something along the way, though, don't we?
Well, we lose knowledge of how to split wood and the grain in wood and how it goes, and because this thing doesn't care.
Yeah.
If you're going to split wood with an axe and a wedge and a maul, you've got to know something about the grain of the wood, where to put your axe in, where to put your wedge in. This thing doesn't care. You can do it crossways if you want to. She'll go through it. Yeah. Oh, they're great.
Great with pieces of elm, huh? And elm are probably one of the toughest pieces of wood to try to work with.
I'll tell you about that. Instead of trying to split elm down the middle, you take slivers off the side on the bark edges and go right around it. And when you get through, you can split the middle, no problem.
Yeah.
One thing about elm is it wears your axe handle out because it's fibrous and it'll clip the axe handle. Pretty soon you've got no axe handle. Have you bought an axe handle lately?
No.
$4.50, I think, was the price I saw the other day.
$4.50, and at one time, what can you recall as a price for an axe handle?
We used to go into any lumber camp and cadge one for nothing. The filer, when he wasn't doing anything else, would shave axe handles. They didn't cost anything.
They didn't cost anything. That's really quite a jump when you get $4.50 for it.
Of course, with an axe on it, then you're talking real money today.
Since we're talking about wood, The matter of home heating, of course, has become a great, great concern. I find that perhaps the state of Maine, we may be in a better position than they are in a lot of places, because for the most part, we're able to convert to wood stoves, if necessary. There are some cases where this is not possible.
Of course, too, we've got the wood.
In the wood.
Yeah. I noticed there was a piece in one of the papers the other day that some legislator down in Massachusetts was introducing legislation to protect the consumers of firewood. Now, there's something to kind of smile at. I don't know, I haven't looked it up, but I have an idea if he'd trouble to go to the library, he'd find that everything he's introducing has been on the Massachusetts books for 200 years or more.
Uh-huh.
We used to have and still have, it's still on the statute books here in the state of Maine, a surveyor of wood and lumber and hoops and staves and shooks and vinegar inspectors and inspectors of hay and all the old fence viewers, all the old-time town officers, municipal officers that protected consumers. And as far as I know, they're still on the books. I don't think they ever repealed them.
It's like the blue laws that remain there indefinitely.
We don't use them anymore. There's town after town has no occasion today for a fence viewer. But if a dispute arises, the selectmen can appoint one.
Yeah.
And I think this fellow down in Massachusetts is protecting consumers against crooked firewood. Probably if he'd go and resurrect the old laws, he'd find they're all on the books.
Yeah, already taken care
Sure.
of. The protection has already been built in over a period of
Cord
time.
is defined and the size of it, and the inspector must make allowance for crooked limbs, and it's all in the books.
Yeah.
You know?
We'll come back to our conversation in just a moment. I'd remind our listeners that this morning we are broadcasting in live remote broadcast from Farrell's in the Village Shop in downtown Augusta. And our guest this morning is our old friend, Mr. John Gould. And we're going to take this brief pause. We cannot accept telephone calls this morning, so our basic program is an interview form. We're going to take this brief pause, and we'll be back in conversation in just a moment. Our program this morning originating live from Farrell's and the Village Shop in downtown Augusta, where the reopening of their new, enlarged, and remodeled store. And our guest of Talkback today is Mr. John Gould. John is an old friend of ours who comes back to the program every so often. I think probably springtime is really the time when you naturally make an appearance on this show, because Fiddlehead these always seem to come into the middle.
I begin to take an interest in things again.
You're telling me, too, you know, we pick up the threads of our conversation that the Micmacs really introduced Fiddleheads, huh?
That's the way I hear it, that the Micmac Indians of the provinces introduced the fiddlehead fern to the... Of course, the fiddlehead is not the name of it. What is it? It's the ostrich fern, I think is... There are two ferns that can be used for fiddleheads, and one of them, the one we pick is the ostrich fern. If you go and look at it late in the season, you'll see the frond on it, you'll realize why it's called an ostrich fern. The frond looks like an ostrich feather. And the other one, I can't come up with the answer now, but there is another one that can be used for fiddleheads. And of course, the fiddlehead, it looks like the neck on a violin, that curled up part, and that's when you pick them. You pick them before they've opened out. Yeah. It's called a fiddlehead.
We've received our lesson in botany this morning in its general terms. Then
it's very general, because I'm not an expert on anything, just on everything.
I want to come back to this matter of home heating and stoves, wood stoves. There's a greater emphasis being placed on the matter of efficiency and the type of stoves, and I think it's a very confusing factor to a lot of people who may be trying to get something that's going to be able to properly take care of the home surroundings that they have to heat in the winter. I never thought of wood stove in terms of efficiency, but I guess it's probably there. There are some that are good and some that are bad.
Well, it's my favorite old-time camp story about Ed Grant put his stove up on pieces of pulpwood, so the stove was up about 4 feet off the floor in the camp up to the Beaver Pond. And he had a party come in. They were all MIT professors, and they looked at it and they said, now look at that. There's this backwoods man that has no knowledge of kinetics or things that you need to know, thermal questions, but he's had brains enough to put that stove up where he's getting the most efficient heat. See? And look at that, and they marveled at Ed Grant's ability to do this, because he was untutored. And when Ed came in, they complimented him, and he says, I just didn't have a stovepipe enough to reach the floor. Put it nearer to the ceiling then. Well,
we've got a fireplace, and I'm thinking in terms of wood stove. That's why I asked that question.
Fireplaces, of course, I suppose are very inefficient, but they're awful much fun.
They're terrific. They eat up an awful lot of wood.
They eat up a lot of wood, but you know, just one popper full of popcorn off of a roaring blaze on the fireplace in the winter is worth a lot of wood. Yeah.
Dottie and you, are you planning any trips, let's say? Yeah, I know you took your great trip, which turned into a book, the trip to Germany, but do you have anything in view along these lines?
We made a trip the other day, last Friday, I think it was. She had a 50th reunion from Arlington High School down in Massachusetts, and we went down to it. And there were an awful lot of people that she didn't know after 50 years. But on the way home, she explained it. She says, I think I've got that figured out. She says, when I was in school with all those blondes, they were brunettes.
Aha. No wonder. But do I understand it correctly, too, that it was only fair that you attend this one because she's attended all of yours in the past?
She said that I've gone to all your foolish reunions. She says, now you come to mine. We had a good time. It's very nice. Although I would rather take a licking than head for Boston. Isn't that something?
Today it is, huh?
Line 7.
Really something.
We spent the night and came home the next day and did it in easy stages.
I'll again remind our listeners that this morning our program is directly from Farrell's at the Village Shop in downtown Augusta. We're doing a live broadcast with our old friend John Gould. We're talking about this, that, and the other, as we are apt to when we get together. It's like a Cracker Barrel conversation. And things that come up along the line are things that we've touched upon before, but there's always a new angle to be discussed. I always remember, John, your days of doing broadcasting over WLAM. We used to bring your Morning Glory horn in. And are you still a collector of these old timers?
Yes, I haven't added to it much in recent years, but inflation and increasing time makes them more valuable as they go along. And I've got quite a bit of money tied up in an Edison cylinder phonograph collection. I think I've got 5 of the machines that play, and I've got something like 1,000 to 1,200 records. And they go all the way from 1890 up into the 1922s. There were some cylinders still made after they began making discs, but most of them are the same. For instance, there's a monologue, a recitation called "The Preacher and the Bear." I guess it's a song, and you get the same track on 3 different kinds of records: the old Edison cylinders, and then the Edison disc, and then you get them again on an Edison that's much like our modern records.
Yeah. Which of course brings up a matter that I think is kind of a fascinating bit. This happens to do with the humor of that particular age, which was more of what we think of, I suppose, in terms of Maine humor, the Uncle Josh series.
Yes, but there was a great deal, of course, of racial humor in those days that is not you can't do it in public anymore. We've liberated ourselves from that. Vaudeville acts like Weber and Fields, which is done in the German dialect. You couldn't get away with that anymore. And this one I speak of, The Preacher and the Bear. The preacher was black, and it's an old-time minstrel show song, which you don't use anymore. The day is gone. They're interesting historically, and that's about it.
However, do you believe that Maine had a type of humor which was uniquely its own and which continues even to today? We don't think too much in terms, I suppose, of Maine as being the place where much humor originates, in a sense, today, modern day.
There is a type of humor that Maine humor definitely belongs with it. Mark Twain discusses it somewhere in his writings. He makes the difference between the witty story and the funny story and the humorous story. And the humorous story is the kind of thing that we like in Maine, where you ramble on and on and on, and what happens has nothing to do with it. The humor depends on the way it's told. And of course, Mark Twain's Jumping Frog story is one of those. And our story, My Fastest Hound Dog in the State of Maine, is one of them.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of them. And you hear people telling them today. Marshall Dodge has capitalized on those old stories. He didn't originate any of the stuff. He's picked it up and he's developed it, and it's the old humorous story. And it's the way he does it, not what he says. The witty story is Twain blamed it on French literature and the funny story on English literature, but you can read that in Twain and get your explanation. I'm not sure I understand it. But French humor tends to be droll, which I think is a good French word, isn't it, Norm?
Droll, yes. Yeah.
Drollery.
Yeah.
Says your argument at least has the merit of being droll.
Yeah. Good judgments in regards to this. Philosophy, Cracker Barrel philosophy, I suppose we're talking about it today. I would, in a sense, talk about the approaches of today. We seem to be living, and maybe this is because I'm getting older all the time, and I say this to myself, we seem to be living in a kind of a cold kind of an atmosphere where upcoming generations don't seem to have any regard. Maybe this is the way it is as you get older. The young think only of the young, and they don't think of the older.
Well, maybe so, but to get back to your humor, of course, what's happened to humor is it's become mechanical and electronic. The days that Mark Twain told his story and set it down, we were dealing in an era when there was no television, no movies, you sat around in the evening in lamplight, and up in the Maine woods, the guides would lie and tell these stories, and the guests would sit around and marvel. They had nothing else to do. Then they'd all go to bed. But today, Johnny Carson keeps on going after everybody's in bed, and at least me. And his humor is mechanical, and it follows a form, and it's the jokes are the same. The jokes are the same. The beauty of that, a lot of people can't stand that television show called Hee Haw,
Right.
Well, Hee Haw is most interesting to anybody that's studying humor, because they've got all the old jokes in the new form. There hasn't been a new joke on Hee Haw in 20 years, but the way they do it is what counts.
Well, isn't that basically true with all humor? There is nothing new. It's always a variation on something that's old.
But the Hee Haw humor on the television show is not the same as the Jumping Frog or the Hound Dog. It's the gag type thing.
Yeah.
It has to be done that way.
Yeah, a running rapport.
It's an electronic requirement,
Yeah.
and this in turn communicates to the audience a new way of looking at things.
But we talk about humor, and I come back to something again that I touched upon about philosophies of people of today too. I read some time back, and this was a book having to do with Prince Edward Island, and whereby it was common because at night down there are no street lights when you get out to the country, and it's as dark as pitch. And the common way of entertainment was for groups to get together, and it was always a matter of going to a home, and the eldest person, the granddad, was the storyteller, and the others sat back and listened, and they gave complete priority to that person, the eldest in the group, for the storyteller. Everybody sat back and just listened.
The families, my grandmother used to sit and read a book to the family, and they'd sit around the table in the lamplight, and some of them would do their homework, and others would pick over dry beans, and they'd occupy themselves in the evening till bedtime. But grandmother would read from Dickens and things like that, and of course the old magazines with their feuilleton, the continued stories. You couldn't wait for the next magazine to come with the rest of the
serial.
story. Yeah, the serial.
Yeah.
And grandmother's job was to read. She practiced in the diction, and my grandmother was a good reader. And she made these stories interesting, and everybody'd sit picking over beans. The kids
and it inspired the other members of the family too to go on to other things, didn't it?
There was nothing else to do, you see. They'd pop some corn, and they'd bring a pan of apples up from down cellar, and they'd put in an evening. And it's lost. It's gone. Yeah. A pity it is.
Who do you feel, John, was the greatest, from the standpoint of your early years, who provided perhaps the greatest inspiration for you in the things that you went on to do?
Well, it's going to be a funny answer, but the answer is Bill Nye. And nobody knows anything about Bill Nye. He was born up in Shirley, Maine, up Moosehead Lake Way. And at a very early age, he said he took his parents to, they stopped on the way, they wound up in Wyoming. And he founded the Laramie, Wyoming Boomerang. That was his newspaper. In later life, he became a columnist for the old New York World, and he was a great platform lecturer, and he was a humorist, and he was a great writer of humor. He's been forgotten. What he wrote about was temporal, and it passed, and people don't read him. People read Mark Twain today because Mark Twain's topics were universal. But Bill Nye, he passed from the scene. His jokes
But
has gone.
you consider him
But
a
his
favorite.
technique of producing humor, of writing humor, is something that anybody interested in that subject should study.
Yeah.
If you can find his books in the library. Bowdoin College has a complete collection of Bill Nye. I collected it and I gave it to him.
Hey, terrific.
Yeah.
John, I see by the clock we've come to the end of our time. I appreciate your visit up here from Friendship today to discuss
I'll
this
come
and the
again
other.
next time if you will.
Hey, very good. John Gould, our guest in live performance today from Farrell's in the Village Shop, downtown Augusta.